Hey guys, welcome back to Eastern University. I'm Coach Shane Drozdzak. Today's lecture we're going to be going over rules of performance for squat, bench and deadlift. So the first thing we're going to be going over today is weigh-ins and attempt selection. So with powerlifting, it is a weight class sport. So the first part of the day is going to be trying to find your designated weight class. So for example, for me, I'm a 105 kilo lifter. So I need to be 105.0 or under to be able to compete as a 105. If I am over 105 kilos, I automatically go up to the next weight class. So I'll be going up and competing as a 120. First things, especially for a new lifter, I would recommend trying to compete around the same weight that you train at. So wouldn't necessarily recommend cutting for your first meet, just because there's too many variables that can happen on the day. For the attempt selection, after you've weighed in, they're going to be asking you for your openers, so your first attempts for each lift. So you're going to be giving it to them, but don't stress, it doesn't automatically mean that they're going to be your final first attempts. You can change them closer to the time of the competition. So, in the warm-up area, they'll be telling you you have 5 or 10 minutes to change your openers. So if things aren't feeling good or if they're feeling really good, you can change your opening attempts depending on how things are feeling. So the next thing we're going to be going over is rack heights. So after we've weighed in, the next thing we're going to be doing is getting the rack heights for the squat and bench. This is an important thing to do, especially because the brand that you're going to be using can be different to the brand that you've been using in training. So for example, for me, if I've been using an Alico rack in training and the rack that they're using in competition is a Rogue, the sizes in the racks and the rack heights can be a little bit different. I have seen this mistake made before with people automatically presuming that the rack that they're going to be using in competition is the same one. So they'll put in their rack heights from another rack or another brand. So each brand is a little bit different, so it's really important to make sure you're getting the right one. Otherwise, sometimes on the day, people can go out on their first squat and the rack can be really high or really low, and that can be a little bit tricky for some people. So after we've got our rack heights, the next thing we're going to be moving on to is our supportive equipment. So for me, I compete in the USAPL, which is the IPF affiliate. So each federation has different approval lists. So making sure that whatever equipment you're going to be using on the day is on that approval list. If you go on most websites of the federation, they'll have a list of the approved equipment. So making sure that your knee sleeves, your belt, wrist wraps, and other supportive equipment you're going to be using on the day are approved for that federation. So one thing you can use is knee sleeves for squatting. You can use wrist wraps for squatting and for benching as well. You can use a belt. These are all optional equipment. The only mandatory things that you need to use are a singlet over the top of a t-shirt and whatever else you're going to be wearing, and also some deadlift socks as well. So the deadlift socks are really important, especially for cleanliness and the health of the lifters. So the next thing is the order of lifts. So we're going to be starting on the squat. So you'll get full 3 attempts of the squat, your opener, your second attempt, and your third attempt. Then you're going to be moving on to the bench press, which is going to be the same. And then finally, you're going to be doing the deadlift. So what they're going to be looking for is your most successful attempts of each of the 3 lifts, which is going to put together a total. So if you're competing against other lifters, it's going to be your total that's going to win. You can have a really strong squat or a really strong deadlift, but if your total isn't high compared to your other lifters, you're not going to be able to beat them. So it's quite often you'll see someone that might have a really good squat, an average bench, and an okay deadlift that can get beaten by someone that has an okay squat, an okay bench, and an okay deadlift. It doesn't really matter if you're a one lift specialist, as long as you're putting together a total that's going to be competitive enough to get you to win your weight class. So the next thing we're going to move on to is the main part of the lecture, which is the rules of performance for the squat, bench, and deadlift. So just like in meet, the first thing we're going to be going over is the squat. So the first main rule of the squat is when the correct weight is loaded on the bar, the head referee is going to yell, bar is loaded. From there, you get 1 minute to get the start command for the squat. If you fail to do so, so for example, if you're still in the warm-up area or you haven't heard the call or something like that, they're subsequently going to be moving on to the next lifter. So if you'd planned on opening on 100 kilos and your next attempt, your second planned attempt was going to be 110 kilos, then you won't be able to add that weight because you've timed out, and they were just going to add 2.5 kilos instead. Okay, so the second rule we're going to be going over on the squat is in order to be able to get the start command, which is an audible squat, we need to be standing upright at the top, fully erect, with knees locked, and we need to be motionless as well. Okay, so this is an important thing to note. When we are standing at the top, as we are sitting up, we want to be making sure that we're not too far forward, we're not too rounded, we don't have soft knees, we're completely extended up, looking at the head ref, waiting for the command. Once we get the squat command, once you've heard it, you can soften your knees a little bit, or if you want to bring your torso forward a little bit more, like for a low bar squatter, you can. But in order to be able to get that starting command for the squat, you need to be following all those, ticking all those boxes. So the next thing is once the lifter is deemed to be finished the lift, he needs to be standing in an upright, motionless, and with the knees locked position at the top. So basically we're going to be finishing the same way that we started, with a nice upright position at the top. We want to make sure that our knees are locked. We don't want to be too far forward, or we don't want to be having soft knees either. So once the referee can see that you are finished at the top and in the position, and you've ticked all those boxes, he's going to give you a rack command. Once you do get that rack command, you then have permission to walk the bar back into the rack. You will usually get some assistance from the spotter loaders as well once you walk the weight back in. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be moving on to is reasons for disqualification for the squat. So the first reason for disqualification is failing to observe the head referee's command. So this is a very common one for a lot of newbie lifters especially. What I see a lot of people is they'll either go out there, not wait for the squat command, and just start squatting on their own terms, or most commonly, you will see people that will finish the squat, get the squat to the top, and then they'll just start re-racking the weight without getting the rack command. So this is usually, both reasons are a reason for getting red lighted. But what I recommend for most people is, if leading into a meet, is to start getting commands. So start the squat command and the rack command from either a coach or from other fellow people in the gym. Second one we're going to moving on to is double bouncing, or any downward movement during the ascent of the squat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to the rack and just give an example of what that looks like. So the first thing we're going to be going over is the double bouncing on the squat. So this usually just occurs at the bottom of the squat. So once we hitting the bottom, we're here. So when we're coming down, we're going to skip just this little bobbing at the bottom is usually why you'll get red lighted. It's got to be nice, smooth transition out of the bottom. So down and then up. For the downward movement on the ascent, so we're coming down on the descent here, down, and then on the up, if we're getting to here, and then there's like a little bit of downward movement there of the bar, that's going to be another reason for getting red lighted. So making sure that when we're coming down, we're nice and smooth, and there's no downward movement of the bar. So the next rule is failure to assume an upright position with the knees locked. So this is basically just the same as what I was explaining earlier. So making sure that we're in the upright position, knees locked at the top, on the start of the lift and at the end of the lift as well. And that's all the referees are looking for. So the next one is stepping back or forward or moving laterally with the feet. So I'm going to go over to the rack again, and I'm going to give you guys a demonstration on how that looks. So we're going to be going on to the moving of the feet. So it usually occurs after the squat is finished. So once we've finished the squat, we're going to be coming up, and if we're any moving forward or moving from side to side, usually this is just a balance thing, so making sure that when we're coming to the top, we're finishing the weight, staying still, there's no rocking, there's no moving forward or to the side. One thing that is permitted though is you can rock kind of backwards and forwards from your forefront to your heel, as long as your feet aren't moving from side to side. So if I'm here, I can kind of move backwards and forwards, but as long as I'm not moving my feet around. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be going over, another reason for disqualification, is depth on the squat. So this is the most common reason why I see most people get red lighted for in competitions, is failing to hit depth. So one of the things that the referees are going to be looking for this is the crease of the hip here is below the top of the knee. So if you can see there, my knee and hip, my knee is a lot higher there. If I'm just parallel there, that's going to be a no lift, or anything lower than that, it's not considered a valid lift. So just remember, everyone has different anatomy and leverages, so it's going to look different on someone that is smaller compared to someone that is heavier. Someone that has larger quads and might be carrying a little bit more weight, it's going to be a little bit harder to tell depth versus someone that might be a lot more slender and have different leverages as well. Okay, so the next reason for disqualification for the squat is contact with the lifter by the spotters and loaders. So usually this occurs when the lifter is on the ascent of the squat, so they might be grinding out a squat. I've seen it happen before with a lot of lifters that look like they're about to fail, but they're really just trying to grind out a squat, and one of the spotter loaders thinks they're about to fail, and they grab the bar or grab the plates and assist them on the way out. Sometimes this can be more the fault of the spotters and loaders than the actual lifter, so it can be a little bit of an unfortunate reason to fail a lift. You might be really trying to grind it out, and if they give you a little bit of assistance and help you on the way up, the head referee will unfortunately red light that because it's considered assisted or some sort of help from the spotters and loaders. The next one is contact with the elbows or the upper arms with the legs. This is not a very common reason, but I have seen it happen before, especially with wide stance squatters. So people that have a really wide stance and they're really low bar, and as they're coming down into the bottom of the squat, their elbows can be touching the thighs, and that's considered illegal contact, I guess. Maybe dubbing that the elbows on the way up can be helping the lifter. But yeah, that is another reason to get disqualified as well. Lastly, any dropping or dumping of the bar after the lifter has completed the lift. Same again with the last reason for disqualification. This is not a really common one. Most people will come to the top and usually walk the weight back in, or have the spotter loaders help them on the way in. But I have seen it a couple of times where people have got to the top, the bar hasn't been stable on their back, and they've got to the top of the lift and the bar has kind of slipped off their back. But very rarely will it be something that's done on purpose. Most people are going to be trying to walk the weight back in, so it's nice and safe for you and for the spotters and loaders as well. So the next thing we're moving on to is rules of performance for the bench press. So the first rule of performance for the bench press is basically when the lifter is getting set up, the lifter needs to have contact with the bench with his shoulders, his head, and his glutes on the bench. The feet must be flat on the ground as well. So this is rules predominantly catered towards USAPL or IPF lifters. Different federations have different rules. So in some federations, they do allow you to have your feet up off the ground. So your heels up off the ground. You still have to have your feet touching the ground, but you don't have to have them completely flat, so you can be up on your toes. But like I said, this is just more catered towards USAPL lifters, where your feet have to be flush along the ground. The next rule is there can't be no more than 5 and no less than 2 spotter loaders on the platform at one time. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Making sure that there's usually a head spotter and 2 side spotters, but for some people you can just have 2 spotters from the side, and some people don't need a handoff or anything like that. So the next rule is making sure that our grip on the bench press is legal width. So the legal width for bench is 81 centimeters. So you'll see the rings here, which is right on 81 centimeters. So all the referees are looking for is making sure that the fingers are covering the rings. So you can have your thumb on the ring, but if the rings are showing there, you'll get asked to re-rack the weight. So making sure that fingers crossing, if you are max width bencher, that you are completely covering the rings on both sides, and making sure that you're keeping that in the same position the whole time. Your hands aren't sliding out or anything like that. So that's really important. So the next rule for the bench is making sure that you have your elbows locked once you've unracked the weight. So once you're at the top of once you've unracked it, you're here, you're standing, you've got to make sure that your elbows are completely locked before you get the start command. Sometimes I've seen lifters get to the top, they have a slight bend in their elbows, they're waiting for the start command. Most of the time the referee is going to ask you to re-rack the weight. They're going to explain to you why you haven't got the start command. Usually just tell you that to straighten your elbows, and then you'll get another attempt at unracking it and waiting for that start command with elbows locked at the top. Once the head referee deems that you're in a good position, so your elbows are locked and everything is in place, he's going to give you an audible start command. So once we have that start command, we are bringing the bar down to our chest, and the referee is going to be looking for the bar to be motionless on the chest. Okay? And what I've seen common for a lot of people when they bring the bar down, they might think the bar's motionless, but the bar's still kind of rocking around on their chest, or it might just be hovering over the chest, not quite touching it. In this case, you won't get a start command, a press command. So we're going to bring the bar down, motionless, and then you'll hear press. So once we've pressed the bar out at the top, and once the elbows are completely locked at the top and we're in position, you're going to hear a rack command. So that's the tricky thing about bench press, is there's 3 commands. There's the start, press, and then there's the rack command. So always making sure that you're concentrating on hearing all those commands. You're not jumping either the start or the press or the rack command. So the next thing we're going to be moving on to is reasons for disqualification for the bench press. So the first reason for disqualification is failing to observe the head referee's commands. So just like I mentioned earlier with the squat, this is a really common one for a lot of new lifters to get disqualified for. Obviously with bench press it's a little more tricky because you have the three commands: the start command, the press command, and then the rack. A lot of the time, you know, for a new lifter, they'll either jump the rack command or they'll jump the start command. So making sure, like with the squat, you're practicing these in training and getting used to making it a habit to do all three at the same time. So the next one is any change in elected lifting position, any raising or movement of the glutes, head, or any changing with feet position as well. So I'm going to head over to the bench press and I'm going to give you guys a demonstration of what that looks like. So the first one is head coming off the bench. So we always want to be making sure that your head is touching the bench. Another thing to note is with female lifters that they have to have their hair tied up as well, so that the head isn't covering the bench, and it makes it a little bit hard for the referees to see what's going on. So when we're coming back down, we bring the bar off, and then as we're coming up on the bench, you'll see a lot of lifters that will tuck their chin or bring their head off the bench. So head's got to stay flat on the bench the whole time. Can't allow any tucking of the head. The next one is glutes coming off the bench. Okay, so this is another common reason. So as the lifter is bringing the bar to their chest, usually they'll go to use leg drive and their butt can come off the bench. So all the referees are looking for that the butt stays on. There's no daylight. There's no lifting of the glutes off the bench. So it's just usually a technical problem for most people. And then the last one is feet position. So making sure that the feet are staying flat the whole time. We're not coming up onto the toes or the feet aren't moving around too much. Making sure that the heels are staying in contact with the floor. So the next reason for disqualification is heaving, or heavy sinking into the chest. So when we are bringing the bar to our chest, we always want to make sure that the bar is nice and controlled and steady on the chest here. So with heaving, all that is when you bring the bar to your chest, you'll get the start command, the press command, sorry, and then after the press command is when you let the bar dip into your chest and then you press it. So, and faster motion here, start, and then heaving off the chest. So heavy sinking, it's got to be making sure that the bar comes down and the bar is steady on the chest, and then there's no downward motion after the press command. So that's really important. The next one, and lastly, is any downward motion of the bar. So just like the squat that I showed you guys earlier, making sure that the bar is got to be a nice upward trajectory. There's no downward motion. So bringing the bar down here, there's not allowed to be any downward motion of the bar. Okay, so this can be any part of the lift. So it could be getting to the top, and you could get nearly to the top, and the bar could dip a little bit, and then you could lock it out. That's still considered downward motion. So the bar has to be a nice, even, straight trajectory all the way through without any dipping down. So the next rule is bar is not lowered to the chest or abdominal area, and the bar is touching the belt. Okay, so sometimes you see people that bring the bar down and they kind of hover it over their chest without bringing the bar to the chest. The bar's got to come all the way down to the chest. And just a note for people that are wearing belts as well, making sure that the bar doesn't come in contact with their belt. So if you're wearing the belt really high, it's probably pretty uncommon, but some people that might have a really low touching point, and having their belt sitting high, making sure that the bar isn't coming down and touching your belt on the way down is another reason for disqualification. So the next one is failing to press the bar out with elbows locked. So bringing the bar all the way to the top and not having those elbows completely locked. So you always want to be making sure that those elbows are locked at the top. You might feel like you've locked it out here, but if the elbows aren't locked out, it's not considered a legal lift, unfortunately. So the next one is contact with one of the spotter loaders on the way up. So just like I mentioned earlier with the squat, if you are getting assistance from one of the spotter loaders, even if it isn't your fault, it's considered an illegal lift. So if you're grinding out a bench and one of the spotter loaders helps you or touches it on the way up, even if it's not your fault, you'll still get disqualified. It's an unfortunate way of getting disqualified because it's out of your hands, but I have seen it happen in the past, and yeah, it can be something that's out of your control. And then the last reason for disqualification for the bench press is any contact with the lifter's feet with the bench. Okay, so when you're sitting up, making sure that your feet aren't wrapped around the base of the bench. You can use that as leverage, so making sure that your feet are just outside, just that base of the bench, and they're not going to be using that bench to try to support yourself. Okay, so the last thing we're going to be going over now is rules of performance for the deadlift. So this is our last of the 3 lifts, and it's a little bit more of a simpler process than the squat and the bench press. There is only one command for the deadlift, which makes it a little bit more easier. So the first rule is making sure that the lifter is facing the head referee. So when you come out, you're facing in the same direction with the bar laid horizontally. And making sure that you aren't coming out and changing the bar to the side and you're facing the opposite direction. For your grip options, you can either use a mixed grip or you can use double overhand or hook grip or whatever. There's no rules about the way you grip the bar. Obviously, you can't use straps or anything like that, like you can in strongman. So you have to be using your bare hands. So on the completion of the lift, the knees have to be locked and you need to be standing erect with the shoulders back at the top. So that's pretty straightforward. So making sure that when you finish, your knees are locked and you're here, standing nice and upright at the finish of the lift. As soon as you're deemed to be in your finished position, once you've locked that weight out and you're standing with your shoulders back, the referee is going to give a down command. So he's going to be standing there with his hand up like this, and then as soon as you finish the lift, he's going to say down. So that's the only one command that the referee is going to give for deadlift. So a lot of the time I've seen lifters go out, usually their first meet, and they're waiting on a start command for the deadlift. You can go out and do the deadlift in your own time. There's no starting command or anything. The only command is just the down command once you've completed the lift. Something to note is that if you go out and you start attempting the lift, I see a lot of, especially sumo deadlifters, that will rock backwards and forwards a couple of times and pull the tension out of the bar. If there's like a visible attempt at the lift and the bar tries to come off the ground and it doesn't, and then you re-attempt it, that first attempt is going to be considered your attempt. So just make sure that you're, whenever you're going to go out and do it and really try to attempt it, that's going to be your only attempt for the deadlift. Okay, so the last thing we're going to be going over today is reasons for disqualification for the deadlift. So the first reason for disqualification for the deadlift is any downward motion of the bar. Okay, so making sure that when you're bringing the bar up, that there's not any dipping of the bar. And this can happen at any part of the lift. This can happen at the top, here, or it can happen halfway through as well. So always making sure that when you're bringing the bar up, it's a nice smooth trajectory all the way through and there's no dipping or downward movement. The next one we're going to be going over is standing at the top erect with shoulders back. So this is a pretty common reason for disqualification for a lot of people. They think that their shoulders are back in position where really they're actually in a shoulders forward position. So always making sure when we're bringing the bar to the top, we're here, that as we're locking the weight out, that our shoulders are back into position. If they're in this position here, you might be standing upright, but if your shoulders are forward, this is unfortunately not a legal lift. And then the next one is knees locked as well. So soft knees is what this one is called for a lot of people when they start the lift. It's here. They might get their shoulders back, but if their knees are soft, this is not going to be a lift, a legal lift. So you make sure that your knees are completely locked, soft, locked. Sometimes it can be subtle, but making sure that here you're completely squeezing the quads and glutes and making sure that those knees are locked at the top to get those white lights. The next one we're going to be going over is hitching. Okay, so any supporting of the bar against the thighs, which is considered an illegal lift. The bar can touch the thighs as long as you're not using it to support. So I'm going to give the two examples. So this is what is considered hitching or supporting, is when we're here and then we kind of get to there and then you start using it to support and kind of ramp off. And then there's this, which is a nice smooth motion. We're not kind of leaning against it and trying to use that weight as leverage. So the next reason for disqualification is stepping backwards or forwards or moving the feet laterally. This is more common for sumo lifters especially that have wide stances and that can lose their balance a little bit at the top. So when they get to the top, making sure that your feet position staying the same, we're not falling forward or moving to the side. One thing that you can do though is once you've got the down command, you can bring your feet in, or you can change your elective feet position after that, but only after the down command. It can't be during the lift. Especially with some sumo lifters that have their feet really wide, close to the toes, making sure that when they get that down command that they bring their feet in so that their toes don't get crushed. The next reason is lowering the bar before the head referee's down command. So when the head referee gives his down command at the top, obviously that gives you permission to lower the bar to the ground. If you do that before the down command, it is automatically a disqualified lift. So making sure you're looking at the head referee, don't just automatically lock the weight out and presume that it's locked out, get to the top and then just drop it straight away. You've got to be making sure that you're letting that head referee see that you're in the finished position, and then he will give you that down command as soon as you are. Okay, so the last reason for disqualification for the deadlift is basically just dropping the weight at the top, not being in control when you're bringing the weight down. This is a pretty uncommon reason, but I have seen it happen before with lifters. They get to the top, and sometimes it can be a grip issue for a lot of people. They finish the lift, and then their grip starts slipping, and they have to let go of the weight. Either that, or that's just a habit they've done in training. Getting to the top and just letting it go. So you can bring the bar down as fast as you want, as long as you're in control of the weight. So your hands have to be on the weight the whole time when you're bringing that bar out. So down, you can drop down as quick as you want after the down command, as long as your hands are on the bar. Yeah, if you just let go of the bar, it's automatically a disqualified lift. Thanks for tuning in today, guys. Hopefully you got some good information from today's lecture. If you've got any comments or questions, leave them in the comment box below. Check us out online at snsbarbell.com, or you can come and drop into one of our gyms in Williamsburg and Bushwick, and hopefully we'll see you soon.